It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to another Stanley Cup Final edition of the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined by Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy, who is live on site down in Florida for all of the action. Was there for Game 3. So I want to kick things off by Ryan opening the floor up to you. Tell us a little bit about what was going on there last night. What was the post-game reaction like? What was the game itself like, other than what we saw on TV, which was legitimate chaos? But give us the breakdown of everything going on there in Florida.
Yeah, I think initially when we were all going down for interviews in the media elevator, the general reaction was just, yeesh. Like, wow, like that was a really bad performance by the Edmonton Oilers. I will say I have not given up on them. I think it was a blip. I think they'll be very mad at themselves. It was interesting just to see how everybody perceived what had happened. Obviously, I went to the Florida room because the Panthers won. So, they talked about sticking up for each other, and they talked to, people were like, oh, what did you do to get Edmonton off their game? And they were like, nothing. This is just how we play. I know, seeing quotes from the Oilers room, Jake Wallman was very enthusiastic. He was like, this is Stanley Cup, like we got to do whatever we can. I'm not sure if that's what they need to do to win the Stanley Cup, but
Right.
I don't know. I mean, that third period in particular was just kind of a mess. And it really got to the point where it's like, all right, boys, let's just wrap this up. Like, attacking Florida players, it's not going to bear any fruit for you. It's just going to make them mad. So Game 4 will be fascinating. That's for sure.
They seem to enjoy when you punch them in the face. Like, it's very weird.
They do have that mentality.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically like, oh, we're doing this? Okay, because we can do this all night.
Like,
And
it's scary.
you saw the net result. Like,
Well,
Connor
they do,
McDavid,
like,
I think he played like one shift late, right? And it was on the power play. And that was smart by Chris Knobloch, because if I'm the Panthers, I'm like, oh, you're going to like cross-check us from behind and like attack us? We can do that to Connor McDavid if you want.
Yeah.
Well,
You
they
don't
do
wanna
it
go down that
better
way.
at it, getting away with it too, right? Like, they'll do it. And actually, I think I saw a quote from Evander Kane last night. He's like, I don't think we did anything that much different than them. They seem to be getting away with it. I mean, that's what they love. Like, they're just like that annoying kid at school that'll poke you. You poke them back, then the teacher turns around and you're the bad guy. Like, it really does have that feeling. But in terms of this actual game itself, is it safe to say that this was Edmonton's worst game of the series so far?
Oh, by far. Yeah, I mean, things just got out of control. And they really spiraled. The penalties were a big part of it, right? There was very little flow to the first period. Evander Kane in particular, it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, when he's physical and staying on the line, he's a tremendous asset for them. And we've seen him score some great goals lately. But when he's over the line, he's a tremendous liability, where he took 2 minor penalties in the first period alone. Obviously, he got booted late. But I think, everybody sort of talked about that Sam Reinhart goal. I believe Paul Maurice called it an inflection point. And even Chris Knobloch was saying, like, once they got those 2 goals to make it 4-1, I think it was even probably the 3-1 goal, he was like, it was over for us. Like, that was a hill too far. They, Corey Perry just scored, so they were feeling better. And then Florida scores, I think it was less than 2 minutes later. He was like, that was it for us. And everything after that just kind of snowballed.
Yeah, and I think another thing that's starting to stand out, and maybe this is just one game, but there's a lot of questions online about whether the Oilers' depth, that has been such a big point of success all playoffs, is starting to maybe disappear a little bit. Michael, have you noticed anything like that?
Well, to Ryan's point, like, when you get in the box this many times, you don't get the chance to run 4 lines. So, when you've got the regular flow, you can roll all 4 lines. When you're killing penalties, then it's the PK unit, and if you've got the power play, then it's the power play unit. So your fourth liners don't get a whole lot of time to kind of chip in with some secondary goals. But at the beginning with, like, this is what Florida does. Like, how many times have we seen it in these playoffs where they smell blood and they just go for the jugular? And we were talking about this with Bruce Boudreau, Katie, where, the
Right.
Florida Panthers aren't, content winning 3-1 or 4-1. Like they really just, they never lay off, and, they're looking to blow you out and win 6-1. And we saw it in games 5 and 7 against the Maple Leafs. We saw it pretty much all series against the Carolina Hurricanes. Like they can humble you like no other team. So, I think for Edmonton, you're hoping this is just a one-off, that, what you did in games 1 and 2 are still going to be there for game 4 and onwards. Like this is going to be a long series. We know that. It kind of sucks for them that they got just, their teeth kicked in this one. But, I don't think we're going to see blowouts for the rest of the series.
Yeah, I mean, McDavid said after, I don't think our best has shown up all series long, but it's coming. So, I mean, again, it's a great quote, but at the same time, they also don't really have a choice, right? I mean, you are going to have to elevate your game if you want to keep up with Florida. Once there's blood in the water in any way, I mean, they feed off of that. I actually had this in rapid fire, but you kind of brought it up, so I just want to dive into it now because it was sort of a testament to the way Florida plays, no matter what the score. Was it a gutless move to have their top line out there just rolling with like a minute 45 left in the game, considering there was so many misconducts and things are getting chippy? Or is that just sort of a testament to the fact that like they don't care what the score is, they are going to keep punishing you? That's how they play.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about Florida right now is they are rolling and they are so deep. Post game, Paul Maurice was talking about their 2 penalty kill units, and he was like, "Don't call them the number 2 unit right now. They don't like that. Like they've been playing so well, they've been the better unit." So I mean, really, like tossing your top line out, it's not necessarily even your best line every night offensively, right? You're getting contributions from all over the place. It's Sam Bennett, it's Brad Marchand, it's like all the defensemen. So I think for the Panthers, it's sort of like, well, what else are we supposed to do? Like everybody's hot.
That's fair. It's true. I mean, everybody's playing well. I want to talk about the penalties. I know we talked a little bit about like the lack of discipline we saw from Edmonton, but 140 combined penalty minutes in game 3. That's the 4th most in Stanley Cup final history. Are we seeing too many calls?
Yes.
I understand. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
It's like, I get that there's a point where things
The Stanley Cup final. Stop calling penalties.
Right. But this is like, okay, at the end of the game, yeah, things were chaos. But early on, again, and this has been consistent every game, I think, at this point, we're seeing so many calls. Like it's tit for tat for everything. And it's taking away, I think, from some of the product.
Honestly, aside from our colleague Ken Campbell, who is probably marking down how many penalties they missed last night because he just loves to see the game called by the book, I don't think average Joe fan or average Jane fan wants to see a penalty-filled game, especially when we've got it like these 2 teams. Like I want to see Connor McDavid, have to fight through hooks, have to fight through even a high stick. Like I know Kane was undisciplined, but come on, like how many cross checks have we seen in these 4 rounds? And now they're starting to call it by the book. It kind of is, it's got to be confusing for the players. Like what's the standard of officiating? It really does change from game to game. And here we are in game 3 of the Stanley Cup final, and they're literally calling more penalties than I see in a regular season game.
Counterpoint to that, the players should figure it out pretty quickly. It's like, it's like, okay, well, they are calling it tonight. Like how many cross-checking penalties were there last night? Like after the first one, you have to say to yourself, oh, okay, they're calling that, so I should not do it. I will point out, post-game, Chris Knobloch said he had no problem with the officiating. He thought the penalties they called pretty much were penalties. He kind of made a joke that he wished it was the same officials that they had in game 2. I guess he wasn't happy with the game 2 officials. But to me, and I know what you're saying, Mike. I mean, special teams, it's a part of the game, but it shouldn't be the entire game. The only thing I don't like is that it feels like they've been evening it up. Instead of not calling penalties, they're calling like 2 penalties. So we've had a lot of 4-on-4 where there's a call and then somebody on the other team, trips or hooks someone and they nullify that. And it's sort of like, all right, I guess that's fair and you have to call everything, but it's just like, the flow to the game, it's really difficult. I guess the only saving grace for the Oilers is that Connor McDavid also kills penalties.
Yeah,
True.
I mean, better because he's never going to see the ice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's actually a great point. Yeah. And I mean, can't think of a better guy to get a shorthanded break than Connor McDavid with the speed that he brings. All right, real quick though, with all the antics that we saw, especially late in the game, the line brawl in the third period, there was like 6 players left on Edmonton's bench at one point between getting tossed and being in the box. It was pretty funny. But rate the hate on a scale of 1 to 10 between these two teams as we stand right now after game 3.
Yeah, well, I think the Oilers got to hate Sam Bennett right now.
Yeah.
Like it was probably a competition as to which guy was going to be hated more, whether it was going to be Bennett, whether it was going to be Marchand, whether it was going to be Tkachuk. I think it's easy to say that, Bennett is topping all three just because, he's going out there taking a pound of flesh off of every Oilers player, but he's also scoring all these big goals. And again, Sam Bennett was the story in game 3. And, that one shift where he hits not just one Oiler, but 2 Oilers and then causes the turnover, gets a nice feed and scores just a beautiful breakaway goal. Like, this is why every team, including the Panthers, are looking to sign this guy in the summer and why his salary keeps going up. So, I don't think the Oilers hate the Panthers just in general, but they hate the guys that are not only pests, but they're actually, scoring big goals.
You know who I feel surprisingly is getting a lot of hatred from the Oilers is Nico Mikkola.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's because he's a big, strong guy. He's not a fighter per se. But I mean, Corey Perry was really going after him at the end of the game, and he's not the first. I feel that they want to fight him, and he's like, no, I've got other things on my mind. I'm just gonna, play hard, win this, second ring for myself. The hate seems really high right now. Like, again, like the last 10 minutes of the game, the Oilers just lost their minds. And, what's the carryover going to be? Probably not much, because if you're Edmonton, you can't go down 3-1. So you have to be really buttoned down for game 4. But that's going to be the fascinating part, is the first 10 minutes, I think, of game 4, how it plays out.
And if you're Edmonton, you can't get sucked into this. I know we talked about it after game 1. I think the hits were like 51 apiece. And we're going, oh, maybe the Oilers are the more physical team in the series. And we haven't been giving them credit because they do have Corey Perry. They've got Darnell Nurse. They've got Evander Kane. They've got Trent Frederick and a lot of guys that can match Florida hit for hit. But again, this is Florida's identity. This is their DNA. This is something that they don't have to be coaxed into playing. I feel like Edmonton is kind of like trying to maybe change their game just because of the opponent. And we didn't really see this style at all in the regular season. And maybe we didn't even see it against, LA or Vegas or maybe even Dallas to that point. Like, they are a skilled team. They've got 2 of the most dynamic, skilled players, forget about in the league, but maybe, going to all time in McDavid and Draisaitl. And they just have to kind of, go tunnel vision and just go for, rely on their speed, rely on their skill, and just don't get mixed up into all that kind of shenanigans, or as our friend Michael Agello was saying, chicanery from last night.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the Panthers are happy to play in the mud, and that's where they thrive, truthfully, down there in the swamps of Florida. But if Edmonton is going to be successful, I think you're right. I don't think that they want to get into a match of trying to play a game that isn't theirs. All right, a couple more on the Stanley Cup final before we move on to some stuff around the league. Skinner pulled last night, 5 goals on 23 shots. So Calvin Pickard comes in. Concern level for Skinner, was this just sort of a compounding of everything going on with Edmonton in general? And do we think he'll be back for game 4?
I have no concern, Ryan. Like, what do you think? Like, I didn't think any of the goals were really that bad.
No, I agree. And again, Knobloch said as much after the game. He had no concerns. They weren't playing well in front of him. The only goal that you could say, like, for me, it's like the Verhaeghe goal. It's like, I saw that coming. It's like the way he curled
great
in.
shot.
Great shot, over the blocker. But it's like, I feel like I've seen that goal against Stuart Skinner a number of times already. Not necessarily this series, but like going back to last year. But even then, as you say, it was a great shot. So for me, when they pulled him, that was like a mercy pull. That's like the guys in front of you are not helping. So let's get you out of there. Get Pickard some reps. And yeah, you know what? Honestly, like when you talk to Stuart Skinner, you just get the sense that he is that kind of Zen-like goalie where it's like, hey, you know what? Next game, it's a brand new day.
And let's not forget, like Cal Pickard, last time he played was May 8th. So basically going a full month between appearances. So like, what are you going to throw a guy who's been sitting out for a month into game 4 where it's basically as close to a must-win game for Edmonton as you're going to get?
Yeah, no chance. I agree with you. I think it was just like, listen, just give this guy a break. It's not getting better for him in there. He's not getting the help that he needs. He seems like he has like a good mindset from a goalie standpoint. So that's interesting to hear from Ryan. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about 2 more guys in this series. I want to break it or kind of combine these questions because I wanted to talk about Bennett and Marchand, but now it kind of makes sense to do it together because they're 2 guys like we spoke about earlier who are both, that rat type of a player that can really get under a team's skin, but they're both doing it even worse by also scoring and being such offensive threats. So between Bennett, the menace, and Marchand, the rat king that they've been calling him down there, who do we think is more likely to be on Florida next year? Because as of right now, they are both making cases that they clearly fit in very well for Marchand, and for Bennett, I mean, his stock's never been higher. So what are we thinking in terms of the landscape for these 2 in their future?
If I had to choose one, and there's a chance that both, including Ekblad, could all sign. But say if you had to choose between Marchand and Bennett, I'm actually leaning towards Marchand being a Panther next year, just because you're not going to have to go full term on this guy. He might be only looking for maybe a 2-year deal, maybe 3. Versus Bennett's probably going to get 7-year offers from around the league. So, just for that point, I think you're going to have to overpay and overturn for a guy like Bennett. Whereas Marchand just might be looking at, I like it here in Florida. I'm willing to give you guys as close to a hometown discount as possible.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's funny because it's kind of counterintuitive. You think, oh, Bennett's been there longer. Marchand just got here. But I agree. Like, if you look at Sam Bennett, like, this is his contract to really cash in. Like, he's never made a ton of money. And, I mean, it is because for most of his career in the regular season, he's kind of like a 50-point guy max. He's not a top line center, but he is a great physical 2-way player. But this is now undeniable. It's like he's a guy that helps you win a Stanley Cup, and he's a guy that elevates at the most important time. So this is, and I mean, everybody online is kind of like having fun with the number. It's like, oh man, now he's going to make 11 based on like how he's playing, and who knows? Yeah, just keeps going up.
Realistically, though, what do we think? Is it 10? Is it now? Is it official? Is it 10? Like 8 times or 7 times 10?
I think it could be because let's put it this way: a team will offer him 10. Yeah. Whether or not that's the best situation for him, like it might be like, a team that's, middle of the road or like, trying to take that next step that overpays, where they give him $70 million. But I think if he was to stay in Florida, I think it's probably more like 9 because again, like he wants to play with Ekblad. If they want to keep Marchand, like, it feels like there's when you have good teams, and Tampa Bay did this as well, where Stamkos and Hedman for years would take less. Sidney Crosby did it in Pittsburgh, so did Malkin. When you want to keep that team together, you're willing to make those concessions on number because, again, like, and I say this as somebody who this will never be a problem for. At the end of the day, what's the difference between $70 million and $60 million?
It's all just change at that point. It's stuff that you find in the couch cushions. And Ryan, you make a good point. Like, I think if he stays in Florida, you can't give him the same or more than Barkov's getting, and Barkov's getting 10 million. Matthew Tkachuk's getting 9.5. It's almost like the Boston situation where Bergeron and Marchand were making so little that when other guys were coming up, it's like, well, you can't make more than Patrice Bergeron. Like, he's the best guy in the team, and he's one of the best guys in the league. So, you've got to be a little lower than that. So I think that kind of works in Florida's favor, where they're saying, okay, well, you want to be here, you're not going to get Barkov money, you're not going to get Kachuk money, so take $9 million. And that gets them, still a lot of money, as Ryan's making a point. Like, is there a difference between 9 and 10 million?
Yeah. Or Bobrovsky money, because at that point, that was like he was actually the guy for a long time in Florida, making more than everybody. So I saw what happened in Colorado, though, where it was like, well, you can't make more than Nathan McKinnon, and then Mikko Rantanen leaves, and Nate was like, I don't care. Do whatever you want. I just want to have someone to play with. That's good. So, I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword there. But either way, I think it'll be interesting to see where these guys end up and how much does Bennett want to be on a team that could win another Stanley Cup. I know for a fact that having been down in Florida, the guys love it there. I mean, they have a great setup. And even now, like with the increased fame after winning one cup, they can still go out most places and nobody knows who they are, which is truly, I think, really nice. They enjoy that. They like the lifestyle. So we'll see. All right, let's switch gears, talk a little bit about what's going on around the rest of the league for all the teams that are not still playing. Max Pacioretty is reported to be leaning towards returning to the Toronto Maple Leafs, according to The Athletic. What's the best use of him in the lineup? And we think it makes sense for Toronto to want him back.
I think so. I actually, it was a tough year for Pacioretty. Like, he was getting hurt, not just in games, but in practices. And he just seemed to, he couldn't stay healthy enough to get in that lineup. And then there was also, he was battling guys like Nick Robertson for playing time. But, come playoff time, you did realize how valuable he is and that physical presence. And I think, he had a bit of kind of stoicism, having spent his majority of his career in Montreal. The big lights of Toronto didn't phase him one bit. So I would bring him back. I would bring back Tavares. I think you need some veterans. I think Florida Panthers and some of these other teams like the Edmonton Oilers are showing that having Corey Perry, having Brad Marchand, having some of these older guys, they are very valuable come playoff time. And, as long as you can get Pacioretty at a decent rate, I would definitely bring him back.
Yeah, Ryan, is this kind of like part of the DNA, that they're maybe looking to improve upon? Because it seems like that might be like what Michael's saying, a guy that could start to fit that new genetic mold that they're looking for.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And, you think about Pacioretty's big guy, plays heavy, can get you some secondary offense there. And, I agree with Mike, especially early in the season, he had great chemistry with Tavares. The Leafs, obviously the forward core could look very different very soon, and how they use that money is going to be interesting. But I think Pacioretty, it felt like a very good fit, and you can probably get him for a reasonable contract.
Yeah.
Maybe he's also the type of player where you institute some sort of load management, because that he has had a lot of injuries, throughout his career, but particularly in the past sort of 4 or 5 years, where you say, like, you don't have to play every game. We want to make sure you're ready for the playoffs because we saw you thrive in that environment.
Yeah, they did the same thing with Jason Spezza a few years back, where he definitely wasn't playing in back-to-back games, and then certain stretches you'd sit him down just because. That kind of guy, I think also they're so valuable off the ice, regardless of what kind of production he puts forward on the ice.
All right. Well, Ryan, you are down in Florida, which is where Commissioner Gary Bettman was for Game 3. And he was put on the spot by Paul Bissonnette about the concern of the NHL and Florida's lack of state tax. He called it ridiculous when he was asked about it live on the TNT panel during Game 3. So what are the thoughts? We're seeing a lot of discussion about this online. I saw a rebuttal that talked about how Florida acquired Sam Bennett, how Florida acquired Sam Reinhart. So good points to be made really from both sides. Do we agree with Gary that this is ridiculous, or is there something to this?
I mean, for me, it's kind of silly because we've seen when agents literally didn't want their players drafted by Florida or Tampa Bay. Like that was a thing back in the day, right? When those organizations were struggling, nobody wanted their players to go down here. So it's not a tax thing. It's a culture thing. It's the fact that, you are playing on a team that is going to compete for the Stanley Cup every year. It's a warm environment. You might be able to own a boat. I've seen like the neighborhood some of the Panthers live in. It's very dock heavy and very lovely.
Yeah.
But it's the fact that it's Bill Zito getting Gustav Forsling off waivers, getting A2 Luosterainen, making that Sam Bennett trade, making that Matthew Tkachuk trade. It's Tampa Bay drafting very well, not only in the first round, but in the third, fourth, and fifth round, getting your Braden Points, like Nikita Kucherov was not a first rounder, like
people forget that.
That has nothing to do with no tax.
It was like the third round. I mean,
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting kind of tired of this. Like it just seems like it's getting a bit stale. Like I get it. The last 6 Stanley Cup finals have featured teams from states where there isn't a state tax. That being said, we've gone over it. Like Nashville stunk this year. Seattle wasn't very good. I think Bettman, what he's saying, why it's ridiculous is because it does take away from Bill Zito and the work that he's put in. And it does take away from the fact that Paul Maurice has instituted a great culture there in Florida. Like, you put Paul Maurice and Bill Zito in another market, put them in New York, put them in Toronto again, and, watch what they can do, because these are two men that, definitely deserve a lot of accolades. And to just put it on the state tax, it does take away from all the good and hard work that the Panthers have done. And it's a bit of a cop-out, I feel.
Do we think that Zito is going to win the GM of the Year award? I mean, what do we think?
I think so. It feels like it's time. Even though Jim Nill pulled off an incredible trade for Mikko Rantanen, it does feel like Nill has won it before. So it does feel like it's Zito's time.
It's difficult because that one's voted on after the second round, right? So after the second round, you're going, oh boy, you could have chosen any of those, guys, whether it's Zito, whether it's Nill. Who was the third finalist? It wasn't the team that was in
I believe.
Dayoff, I think. Yeah.
Even Chevy and the work that he did, all 3 GMs are well deserved of that. That, for me, I would lean towards Zito just because, the Marchand acquisition was great, but that one was kind of like, you didn't have to work hard for that one. It felt like
but the Seth Jones one.
That's what I was just going to say. But the Seth Jones trade, where everyone was like, Seth Jones is done. Why would you even go for this player? Have you not watched him play in Chicago? And, great scouting reports on, Seth Jones, because he's been outstanding. Like, I love how Aaron Ekblad has played in this series and in this playoffs. And Ryan, I agree with you. Mikkola has been a guy that, wasn't on my radar. I didn't know a whole lot about him, but now it's like, yeah, I know who Nico Mikkola is, and definitely Connor McDavid knows who he is now. But Seth Jones has been the real revelation for me because, he's earning every bit of that salary that he got. And, it was looking like a salary that was just kind of an anchor around his neck. Like, was he going to get traded out of Chicago with that kind of deal? Good on the Panthers for taking a chance on him.
And Bill Zito knew him from Columbus.
See, there we go, Ryan. You're connecting the dots all over the place.
Yeah.
Hockey, man. Everybody knows everybody. All right. Well, talking about big retirement that was announced yesterday, TJ Oshie, 16 seasons, 1,010 regular season games, 302 goals, the Stanley Cup, and maybe even more memorable was that one legendary shootout in Sochi. So I'm not sure where he lands on thinking about him for a hockey Hall of Famer, but does it feel like this is certainly a guy that will be in the USA Hockey Hall of Fame very soon?
Yeah, no
Hockey
doubt.
Hall of Fame, no.
Yeah.
US Hall of Fame, yeah.
Yeah.
Hockey Hall of Fame, I think he's Hall of Very Good.
Yeah, like TJ Sochi, like that's where his, that's what people know him as. And, he does get the Stanley Cup in Washington, but, when you look at his career overall, like I don't think he had the numbers to justify a Hall of Fame, entry, but very good player. Like the Hall of Very Good is getting very crowded for me.
Yeah.
You know, true. And he's such a likable guy. And I think that's like another thing that always like factors in, where it's like, if it was someone that like just didn't really have much of a personality, you're probably not even thinking about it, but you're like, oh, he's a great dude. No, it's like the same way we always like, not that Marc-Andre Fleury isn't amazing in his own right, but I feel like we talk about him more because he's just awesome and everyone loves a person like that. And so I feel like it's sort of the same thing with TJ Oshie. It's certainly exciting to have that moment. I think he tied his retirement into like the anniversary date of like the 2018 Cup parade or something with the fountains. He had it there. It was pretty nice. All right, well, let's talk about other hockey specifically. We'll start with you, Ryan. Some NCAA stuff. NCAA colleges are soon going to be able to pay student athletes directly after settling 3 lawsuits. So how will this affect D1 hockey? And should the CHL start doing more to compensate players?
Yeah, the CHL is at a tipping point right now because just yesterday, actually, I had it out there on Twitter. Brady Wasselin, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick for the 2026 draft. He was with OHL Niagara. He has committed to Boston University. He could be joining the Terriers as soon as next year. His NHL draft year, if not, it'd be the year after. He is the second top 10 pick to commit from the CHL recently, because Keaton Verhoff, who played for WHL Victoria, is now going to North Dakota. This is a huge sea change, right? Like when the whole NCAA eligibility thing happened, we were like, okay, well, this will be interesting. We'll see which players go over there. Probably a lot of older guys that, their junior careers are basically done. But now we're getting to the point where it's like, well, what happens if Michael Misa doesn't go straight to the NHL? Does he go back to the OHL or does he go NCAA? People are talking about Gavin McKenna. All the big CHL names are now on the table. And, Canadians can't get NIL yet, but there are other avenues for them to earn revenue on an NCAA campus. So I think the CHL, they got to start having some meetings this summer, and I'm sure they will, because unless you're the London Knights, who don't seem to lose anybody and actually have seemed to gain players, the Kitchener Rangers are the same. Teams like the Victoria Royals
seem to gain cars too, right?
What's
they all
that?
seem to be driving around nice cars there too.
Yeah. Like the Victoria Royals lost Keaton Verhoff and Cole Reshny. They're both going to go to North Dakota. So like they lost their 2 best players for next year already. So yeah, like pay players. Like, I don't know. Again, maybe this is hyperbolic, but there might need to be like a new CHL. Like maybe there's kind of a super league, and then there's like a second tier where teams, because not every franchise is going to be able to pay their players a bunch of money, right? Like some of these are like community-owned teams, or it's like they're owned by the most successful doctor in town, like that kind of thing. They don't have like these huge endowments like NCAA schools. They don't have the same resources, but they do serve like a tremendous, role in the community. So you don't want to see teams disappear from the CHL, but we are, as Paul Maurice would say, at an inflection point.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this is a major problem and a major tipping point, as you're saying. Like the CHL has long been the developmental league of the NHL. What you don't want it to be is a feeder league for the NCAA, where you get some guys on maybe, and I think we're going to see
USHL.
Yeah. Well, we're going to probably see more underage players get exceptional status because of this, because they're going to be obviously too young and, not even mature enough physically to play in the NCAA, but, maybe they spend a year or 2 in the CHL, then go NCAA. And again, is that the route you want, where you're just feeding players to college? Probably not. To Ryan's point, there's a huge have and have not disparity in the CHL. For every London, you got some teams where you're playing basically a tiny barn without NHL style conditions. So, whether that means, if we do start seeing, players getting paid in the CHL and getting paid the levels that the NCAA is doing, do we get revenue sharing so that, London doesn't get just a competitive advantage? There's a lot of meat on this bone for the CHL and all of hockey to kind of chew on. But to Ryan's original point, that this is a game changer, not just for NCAA, but for all of, major junior hockey.
Well, listen, every point you just made about, kind of the challenges for the CHL with the top level teams and then, everybody else, same issue in the NCAA, right? For D1 hockey. I mean, you've got an absolute monster with these Big Ten teams, some of these NCHC teams, a few Hockey East teams. Then you've got leagues like, you've got Atlantic Hockey, who has maybe a few that have a little bit of an upgraded facility, things like that. Then you've got the ECACs full of Ivy League teams who are in a completely different conundrum in terms of how they recruit, what they're able to do, their transfer abilities. So I think it's, again, an issue where it's like, are we turning this into just like a, college football situation where you've just got these mega teams at the top because that's where all the money is and they're just going to scoop up all these guys. The interesting part will be, the turnover, because again, these guys are going to come in 1 or 2 years. They just want to go pro. So they're using the NCAA. They're making the money. They're getting maybe a little bit more of the strength conditioning facilities, and then they're on their way. So it's interesting to see how both the leagues will sort of handle what's best for them. Real quick, Ryan, is there any way that we see the CHL benefiting from having its players heading to the NCAA? Is there, any selling point there? I mean, is there any way that this can be kind of a good thing for them? What do you think?
Not really. I think we've seen the benefit of the NCAA eligibility thing already, which is that the CHL has been able to bring in players that had previously avoided major junior because of the eligibility, right? So like they're getting junior A players, Oshie getting Simon Wang, for example, this year. Kitchener getting Jack Pridham, who had already been drafted by Chicago in the NHL. Getting Christian Humphreys, who had already been drafted by Colorado, getting some young players, getting USHLers, like Montgomery in London, who's an Ottawa Senators pick. So I think we've seen the benefit already for the CHL, and now they're in for the pain part. But who knows? I mean, the landscape might change in a year or two. Like, we're still so early on in this new world.
Yeah. I miss the days where like Matthew Tkachuk went to London and Patrick Kane, came over to London as well. And major junior teams were poaching from US schools, not the other way around. Come on, people.
I'm sorry. I feel like this
Matthew Tkachuk was supposed to go to Notre Dame.
This is a you versus me thing.
Was it Notre Dame that he was going to go to?
Yeah.
I don't know. US and Canada, man, we just can't seem to figure out a way to get along anywhere right now. All right, well, let's hit a little rapid fire before we wrap up our episode of The Big Show. But first, I want to remind everyone that you don't need to drop a fortune on sticks when you can get a pro-level composite stick without the pro-level price tag by visiting stix.com. That's STIX.com, so make sure to check it out. All right. Last night, DJ Khaled, part of the Florida pregame show, getting everybody hyped up. Name another celebrity that you would want to see, if you could pick anybody, to be involved in a pregame hype up moment for a team.
Oh, I'm going Snoop Dogg. I was there in LA for the All-Star game where he was basically in that DJ Khaled role, and it was amazing. Definitely better than DJ Khaled, who wasn't even DJing. Okay, this was brought up last night. Like, you call yourself a DJ and you're not even DJing.
It's fun.
For the record, he did DJ in the first intermission.
Okay.
He did a DJ set. He did spin. It wasn't the greatest crowd because everybody left to buy beer and go to the washroom, but he did his thing. That's a great question. I'm gonna go with Metallica. I know they've been to hockey games before and done anthems and stuff like that, but there's a band that's been around long enough that they could do a greatest hits package. Nothing after the Black Album. Let me put that. Let's make that clear. But they could do a fun little medley, and pretty much everybody would know the songs.
I like it. I'd probably go, if it was going to be somebody else coming down and doing it in Florida, Pitbull, just because I feel like he's just nuts and like he's got the fire and like you just never know. I mean, he puts on a good show, and it's just Mr. 305. So I feel like
Yes,
that would be a lot of
worldwide.
yeah, exactly.
He's the Miami Mike Traikos.
Exactly.
Yes.
No many times people always say I look like Pitbull, and it's like I
It's
don't see it.
amazing. We're just gonna send you down there, and you'll be
Put the
in
shades
the
on.
next show. All right, real quick, we got two more. Don't have to go too far on these, but biggest surprise player for the Stanley Cup final so far, and let's focus on good way. Surprise.
Ooh, I'm gonna let Ryan go here because I'm still thinking.
Nice of you.
Yeah, biggest surprise player. I you know what? I'll go with Nico Mikkola. I loved his game last year in the final, but it was more in a like, bury the puck in the corner and no one can get it out, and that's how we kill time at the end of the game when we're winning. But he's been a lot more involved this year. I think he's really finding his confidence as somebody who can rush in that Panthers system that wants the defenseman to be aggressive.
I'll go with Edmonton, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but I'll say Corey Perry. Like the guy's like 40 years old, and Corey Perry, again, he keeps scoring, and this guy should be slowing down. This guy should just be destined for a fourth line role, but with Zach Hyman out, Perry's really been able to kind of elevate his game, and I don't know how he's playing this many minutes, but I'm sure he's using a lot of ice and probably all the ice in South Florida right now.
All right, last one. You mentioned Corey Perry. We've got some fun between him and Brad Marchand always. So who's the bigger rat, Brad Marchand or Corey Perry? Because I know they call Corey Perry the worm, but if we're going with the theme of the rats in Florida, who's a bigger rat? Because I kind of feel like, I don't know, Corey Perry, he gets under everybody's skin pretty well too.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, at this point, I would say Corey Perry, because if you look at what Brad Marchand's doing on the ice, it's mostly scoring goals and, playing fantastic two-way hockey. I think Corey Perry has been much more in the hack and whack category, although he has also clearly scored a bunch of goals too. But especially last night, it was sort of the worm was off the hook. Let's put it that way.
Yes. Quote of the day.
How's Ryan do these? I just don't get it. I don't know how I can keep up. I'm going to go with Corey Perry as well. It's so funny. Like, there is a long list of pests in this series. Like, obviously, we have Matthew Tkachuk has been oddly silent in regards to like the rough stuff and all that kind of, the chicanery, as our colleague is saying. But, I would put Perry above them all. I would even put maybe Evander Kane a close second, because he's just been just kind of nasty. And obviously he went too far yesterday because, he's obviously hurting his team if he's spending that much time in the penalty box. But yeah, Edmonton, they seem to be out-ratting the Panthers right now, which is probably working against them.
Yeah, I would agree. And then you got Jake Wallman out here squirting guys with water bottles from across the bench, which I don't even think he got in any trouble for. But Brian Boucher was between the benches and he was not happy about it for the broadcast. So yeah, it'll be interesting. Again, Edmonton can't afford to get into that in Game 4, but there's certainly a lot of history now between these two teams, and we're starting to see it come to a point, and it'll be interesting what happens in Game 4. But that does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show, talking all about the Stanley Cup Final. Game 4 coming up on Thursday. Thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Katie Gaus. He's Michael Traikos. Brian Kennedy. He'll be on site in Florida. We'll have more action for you coming up. Thanks for watching.